certain diet that can be helpful in removing some of that unwanted fat. And so up until this point, lipedema, they pretty much said, oh, you're just going to have to live with it. There is no diet. There is no exercise. There are no lifestyle changes that's going to help you with it. Well, this paper I'm about to read to you here today begs to differ, and they're going to explain exactly how this mechanistic of keto works with helping with lipedema. So let's get into the study. The researchers Keith, Seo, Rausamit, Pfeiffer, Wahi, Staggs, Dudek, Gower, and Carmody. It looks like most of them are from various lipedema foundations and things like that. The Lipedema Project in Boston, Massachusetts, Lipedema Simplified, Comprehensive Weight Management Program, I Choose Health, University of Alabama at Birmingham, Department of Nutrition Sciences. So lots and lots of different researchers involved in this one. All right, so let's get into the abstract, and then we'll read the main part of the study. Lipedema is a common yet misdiagnosed condition, often misconstrued with obesity. Oh my gosh, if I hear one more person mock a woman because she has lipedema, guys, you can't control it. Lipedema is not something these women especially, it happens to guys too, but women especially, because of our very aesthetic society, they deal with this issue of lipedema, and it's devastating because they diet, they cut calories, they exercise their ass off, and what happens? Nothing. That fat doesn't come off of them. And so this research today hopefully is going to give them a little bit of hope. Now, I'm not trying to say keto is going to be a grand panacea for lipedema. It's not, but they definitely show mechanistically why it could be helpful. But yeah, we're looking at these women with that fat on their legs especially, and people are like, oh my gosh, look what a sloth they are. Look how many donuts they're packing down. And they're not realizing they actually have a medical condition. So we need to be a lot more sensitive that this isn't just obesity from overeating. Lipedema affects women almost exclusively. It's painful and life-changing. It's been long thought to be resistant to lifestyle interventions, things like diet and exercise. In this paper, we discuss all the possible mechanisms by which a patient could adopt a ketogenic diet to alleviate many of the unwanted clinical features of lipedema. This paper is also an effort to provide evidence for the hypothesis of the potency of this dietary intervention for addressing all the symptoms of lipedema. Specifically, we examine the scientific evidence of the effectiveness of adopting a ketogenic diet by patients to alleviate clinical features all associated with lipedema, including the excessive and disproportionate lower body adipose tissue deposition, the pain that's associated with that, and the reduction in the quality of life. Can I tell you how many women that get that have this lipedema, they get so frustrated that they comfort eat. And so they eat foods to comfort themselves because they're like, no matter what I do, I can't get that lipedema weight off my body, so I might as well eat a bunch of junk. So then they not only have the look of obesity on the bottom, but then they actually get obese on the top, and it's just the very antithesis of what they should be doing. So it's a frustrating condition. I could not imagine having to deal with all that and the pain and the quality of life issues like going up and down stairs, being in an airplane seat, a movie theater. All that's going to suck because you got a big butt, big legs. It's like it's got to be miserable. And then all the public judgment, even when you're pursuing eating healthier. We also will explore several of the clinical features of lipedema currently under debate, including the potential existence and nature of edema, metabolic and hormonal dysfunction, inflammation, and fibrosis. The effectiveness of a ketogenic diet on addressing clinical features of lipedema has been demonstrated in various human studies, and it shows promise as an intervention for lipedema. We hope this paper leads to an improved understanding of optimal nutritional management for patients with lipedema and stimulate future research in this area of study. So this is not an actual study. What they're doing is they're going to look at a lot of the current data that is out there, and they're packaging it all together in this one paper. So this isn't like original science. This isn't a randomized trial, but they're making the case that we have enough proof of concept that we should definitely take a look at doing a clinical trial, a randomized trial, looking at this condition. So if you joined us late, I'm reading from a paper from the January 2021 issue of the journal called Medical Hypotheses, and the title of the paper, Ketogenic Diet as a Potential Intervention for Lipedema. So let's get to the introduction. The disease entity lipedema was first clinically recognized in 1940 at the Mayo Clinic in the United States. According to a monograph published by Dayan and colleagues, the diagnosis of lipedema is made clinically and is typically defined by the presence of a disproportionate and symmetrical accumulation of adipose tissue, that's fat, in the lower extremities, accompanied by complaints of orthostatic edema. So that's where there's water buildup, and then that can lead to pain. It's a nasty, nasty condition, you guys. Lipedema is further distinguished by lower body hypersensitivity and pain, bruising with very minimal trauma. So it doesn't take much for those fatty deposits to bruise. So you just touch them and they can turn to bruises. Firm nodules in the subcutaneous fat, which that has to create pain as well. And then apparent resistance to all traditional and exercise regimens. I will caveat that one. Traditional meaning low-fat diets, low-calorie diets. Those don't touch lipedema. And that is why it's been commonly thought that diet and lifestyle don't help with lipedema, because low-fat diets and walking on a treadmill aren't doing much for it. So that's why they've always believed that. Although lipedema was initially identified in 1940, to date, little is known about its clinical features, the natural history, causes, and therapies. This paper is divided into two parts. In the first part, we're going to summarize what we know about the epidemiology, diagnosis, clinical manifestations, and the conventional treatment for lipedema. In the second part, we hypothesize how patients adopting a ketogenic diet could directly and positively impact the clinical course of this condition, and we propose the mechanisms for those effects. That second part is going to be really fascinating, so stick around, you guys. You won't want to miss that. But let's get to the epidemiology first. Lipedema is an underdiagnosed disorder that is thought to be relatively common, especially in women. Currently, listen to these statistics. Currently, it is estimated that lipedema impacts about 11% of women. More than 1 out of 10 of you ladies watching this right now, you probably have this. And so if you have fat deposits on your leg or in weird places on your body, and no amount of diet and exercise has helped with that, you could be suffering from lipedema. Occurring only rarely in men who have hormonal dysfunctions, and it has a profoundly negative impact on your quality of life. Of patients with lipedema, and more than 50% are obese. So not only do they have this look of obesity because of the lipedema, but then on top of that, they're actually obese. Half of them are. They also have secondary lymphedema, often being lymphedema, not lipodema, lymphedema, often being the direct consequence of the obesity rather than the lipedema. It's hard to keep all those terms straight, but lipedema. Additional research studies have shown obesity to co-occur with lipedema in 85 to 88% of all the study participants, which demonstrates the necessity for an effective intervention that addresses both obesity and the lipedema. Recent literature also suggests lipedema has genetic underpinnings, with hormonal changes, stress, and/or surgery playing an important role in its onset. So if you have hormonal disturbances, which most people do, if you have stress in your life, and I can't imagine anything over this past year that might have given you some stress, or if you've had some kind of a surgery, all of that could play a role of this happening. All right, stigma and the lack of awareness. Keep in mind, most of the researchers on this paper work at lipedema foundations, and they're trying to make lipedema awareness. So they're going to put some of that in this paper. Most medical professionals, this is shocking, and I see I've got one over here on Clubhouse. Dr. Catherine, hello, is a medical doctor, and so she can probably concur with this. Most medical professionals are just unaware of lipedema, often misdiagnosing it as obesity, because signs and symptoms are simply not recognized. I remember seeing Gary Taubes when he wrote Good Calories, Bad Calories about 14 years ago. And he did these lectures where he would talk about the calorie hypothesis and why it's not exactly a complete picture of the obesity problem, because he said, look at these people with lipedema. Are they eating the proper amount of calories for the upper part of their body, but they're overeating calories for the lower part of their body? It was a powerful kind of imagery that he did, kind of explaining it in that way. Culturally, lipedema is caught in the same social stigmatization as obesity, to the point of abhorrence. Yeah, I mean, if you look at this and go look up lipedema, pictures of these women that deal with this condition, it's really hard to miss. And it's unfortunate because these women will then beat themselves up their entire lives that they're not cutting calories enough, and they're starving. They're not exercising enough, and they're wearing themselves out. And it's got a bad stigma. While weight stigma influences many aspects of the lives of people with obesity and lipedema, it is most impactful in the areas of healthcare. Listen to this, you guys, where understanding, acceptance, and support are critical to get accurately diagnosed, get an effective treatment plan, and then ongoing health maintenance. I would argue, and we've had other studies come out that kind of confirm this, I would argue that people with obesity in general, and then with lipedema, they don't get the full health care that they need. Now, that's an aside. It's something that I've read a lot of papers on, a lot of stories on, patients talking about this. I know doctors talk amongst themselves of how can we have more of a heart for them without judging them, blah, blah, blah. But it's something that those people, more than any other patient population, desperately need. All right, so how do they diagnose lipedema? Though the diagnosis of lipedema is generally done in a clinical setting, there is no formal medical training on how you diagnose it. There are also few resources to guide clinicians with respect to this condition, and no standard of care exists for lipedema. In fact, the term lipedema is often confused with the terms lipidemia, which I've accidentally said a couple of times, or lipemia, which apply to alterations in your cholesterol levels, adding further confusion during patients' attempts to attain a diagnosis. So the doctor might say lipidemia, but they meant lipedema, and so then they accidentally get put on cholesterol-lowering medications, which probably, if they're obese, half of them are obese, they probably have some cholesterol dyslipidemia going on, and so they get put on statin medications, and that's not going to fix their lipedema. This was first suspected by the clinical observation of unusual AT distribution, generally with disproportionate below the waist. Often it is misunderstood. That's adipose tissue, AT. Often it is understood by the patient as a family trait. So most of the time, doctors are like, oh, that's just genetic. Don't you hate it when they do that? I mean, it's not always genetic. I suppose there is a genetic factor there, but I hate when you have high cholesterol. Oh, you just have a genetic predisposition for high cholesterol. How do you know that? Like, there's this test you can run to see if it is genetic, but don't just assume that. They always do.